next to me. So if you hear any strange noises or anything like that, please message me or say, hey, we need to get into a quieter place, but hopefully we will be okay. So I want to, at the top here, thank our partner, the Resilience Initiative. They have been an amazing partner to us since 2020. If this is your first introduction to us, if you weren't with us last week or haven't been with us for any of the fundraising Fridays, Tiffany and I are from Progressive Multiplier, and we are a funding intermediary, and our vision is a progressive movement with the scale and power to achieve justice, realize democracy, and restore the environment. And we believe that money multiplied is change amplified. So we're here to help groups like yours figure out that path to sustainability and scalability for your missions. In our partnership with the Resilience Initiative, we have two primary offerings outside of the occasional larger trainings like this. We have our Fundraising Fridays, which are monthly trainings that are 90 minutes. If you are interested in signing up for those, look for Janet's from Resilience Initiative's monthly newsletter that has the topics, who the trainers are, and you can register from there, or reach out to Michelle at resilienceinitiative.org, and she can get you hooked up with the Fundraising Friday schedule. Tiffany is among the trainers, my colleague who is on the phone with us, as is several of our other staff members. So you can get to know the whole Progressive Multiplier crew. We also offer one-on-one fundraising coaching, and we can do just about anything, very broad spectrum of topics. So really think about your role as an ED, as a fundraiser, and what's really sticky for you. What do you have trouble navigating, whether it's training your board to fundraise, building a fundraising culture, more tactical things like mid-level donor management, getting your communications and your fundraising to jive, whatever it might be, let us know, and are happy to put a block of up to 5 hours to that. Tiffany, any other examples of good strategic assistance projects that have come across your desk lately with the Resilience Initiative crew?
Let me think about what I've been hearing lately. Prospecting. I'm hearing a lot of people say, I don't know where to find
Where to
people.
find
Help
donors?
me find the people.
Yep,
So I've been working on that recently.
awesome. Um, And thank you guys so much for introducing yourselves in the chat. And Katie, appreciate it so much. Those of you who are in Texas and in Florida, you understand what last hurricane season was for all of us. So really appreciate the good wishes for repairs. Um, so let me take a second for those of you who weren't with us last week and introduce myself. So my name is Bethany Mackey, and she, her pronouns. I am a nonprofit fundraiser turned executive director based here in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I started my fundraising career at the Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force in 2002. PATF is now called Allies for Health and Wellbeing, and they are celebrating 40 years. This year. So I am so excited for them, and to think that I was there at the beginning part of their history. That's sort of humbling, feeling my gray hair today. So PATF is really where I learned, where I fell in love with fundraising. I learned that it could be cathartic and healing and life affirming for both those who are giving and those who are raising money for a mission. So 11 years after my time at PATF, I moved south here to Florida and incidentally married a man who has AIDS. So part of our journey together has been giving to Equality Florida, which is the leading organization here in the state combating HIV criminalization laws. And they do a fantastic advocacy job. So we do a lot of speaking before Congress here in the state and a lot of advocacy with them. So imagine my full circle surprise, as I call it, after starting my job with Progressive Multiplier. went as the inaugural program director when our founding ED, Phil Radford, told me that Equality Florida was actually one of the grantees I'd get to work with and help them get stronger through diversified fundraising. So getting to know groups like Equality Florida has really prepared me for my role as executive director. I succeeded Phil in that role. It'll be 3 years ago in November. And being the ED of an organization that literally exists to help people raise money for their missions, and connect more people, investors, individual donors um, to that power of supporting a mission financially is literally my dream job. So thrilled to be here, and even more thrilled to pass the mic to Tiffany, who now runs all of our programs, and that I am honored to call a friend and colleague.
Hi there, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Greetings from Los Angeles, where it remains morning and my gears are still getting turning. So be patient if I miss something. My name is Tiffany and I use she or they pronouns. And I made my way to LA from Chicago through Northeast Ohio and then Maryland before landing here between the mountains and the ocean. Oops, hold on, I lost something. See, I told you my brain was just waking up.
I was gonna say the caffeine hasn't hit bottom yet.
It really is not. Um, I am the managing director of program here at Progressive Multiplier. And while I'm just a co-pilot for Bethany today, how I came to be here at PM is a story that makes me quite proud. Um, Unlike nearly everyone here, I'm sure, I did not go to career day in elementary school and walk out convinced that I wanted to spend decades asking strangers for money. But here I am after more than 25 years of doing it to help you and your movement learn to do, and our movement learn to do it together. Um, and a whole lot of other revenue generation activity as well. I joined the National Immigration Law Center shortly after moving to Los Angeles and helped to lead the revenue work there. Um, and at both the National Immigration Law Center and the NOC Immigrant Justice Fund, which is their associated 501c4. That's where I had the good fortune to become a Progressive Multiplier grantee partner and a recipient of support from PM and from Bethany directly. So when Bethany learned that I was looking for my next opportunity, um, I knew that sitting on the other side of the table with her was a no-brainer. I could see the impact that I could have across the movement. Um, and I really wanted to see people that support the people that were changing the world in the ways that I wanted to see the world changed. So I'm thrilled to be with you all. I hope that my presence will help at least one of you walk away with something new that you can carry with you beyond today. And I'll try to keep questions in the chat popping up on Bethany's radar as they come.
Awesome. Thanks, Tiffany. So I want to hear from the crew that we've got on the phone. I think we're up to 17 folks now. I see lots of familiar names in the chat, but we had a great session and discussion last week. I promised that we would, the questions that we didn't get to last week, we would get to this week. So these were the holdovers, largely around options around how to use staff development if you're an ED and that's it. That's all the fundraising bandwidth you've got. Or if you're thinking about maybe staffing internally or externally and outsourcing. So those are questions we're going to handle today. Tell me what else you all would like to get out of the how of being an ED who fundraises today. Whether it's throw it in the chat or come off mute. We want to keep it casual today.
Well,
I
for
have a
me,
question.
honestly,
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I'll go after.
Okay, so for me, honestly, it's everything for me.
That's
We're just
great.
the fundraising piece has always been a downer for us, and
Mhm.
so we need to find our starting place and take off. It's just been, so I'm definitely got my pen and paper.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Anna?
Yeah. Thanks. And I'll raise my hand next time.
No, go ahead.
I'm so used to people not speaking right away. I didn't think there would be a lot
Right.
happening. So I'm in this bucket of one fundraiser, ED. And I think I'm trying to navigate how and when to start. So I'm focused on foundations and like institutional philanthropy because that's what I have bandwidth for.
Yep.
But sort of like thinking to the future, and there's some individual donors, but there's no focus on like major gifts or anything like that. At
Okay.
what point and I'm also okay, contextually, I'm a small, like 1 year old organization. For those of us who are like growing and are trying to
Mhm.
think about what's the next step, um, it's a little bit about staffing, like what's the next staffing decision, or in like staffing investment that you make for your team, and how does that relate to like when you scale to include individual donors as a strategic focus, beyond institutional philanthropy, which will have its years of good and then its drop offs.
Not
And
so
so
good.
just like thinking about what you said last time about financial resiliency, it feels like for some, I'm not in a position. Sorry, this is a very long question.
Mm.
I think this is very complicated. Just thinking about diversifying revenue in the sense of like institutional philanthropy versus individual donors, and how do you start thinking about building those?
Got it. And if I'm looking down, it's because I am furiously writing notes, so I'm capturing things. Um, no, I really appreciate that. And I'm looking also, Kate, go ahead. I see a hand raised there.
Hey, yeah. Thanks for this. I'm actually super interested in just the value of development directors. I have to say, my experience has been, and I wish this wasn't true, but it is. All of this fundraising is just personal relationships and connections. And even if I had a development person, I would then still have to do all the work of the personal relationships and connections.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to bring on a grant and admin person to deal with, like, there's a bunch of admin, right? Like a bunch of the like grant portals and reporting and all the admin stuff. I have my own war stories about hiring. It turns out that the new thing that happens when you hire entry-level staff is that they accept and then they renege a week after they accepted because they play it off against other jobs.
Yep.
Incredibly frustrating. That's happened to us twice with this job. And months and time, and it exists, all the resources we've spent on hiring and we still don't have somebody. So that's my current frustration about the job market. But I do think that like I took over an organization that had a bunch of financial issues and had lost a bunch of staff, but they had a whole development team, and we're actually doing better with development than they did when they had a development team because of personal relationships. So I just think it's worth thinking about that question, and would love thoughts on like, when does it make sense? And what doesn't it?
100%. And I feel like we need to have a community of care session about those of us who have had really, really crappy hiring experiences in this fundraising vein. Because
like a whole day?
Like a whole day, maybe. There might need to be chocolate.
Also, how awful headhunters are. Can we talk about that too?
Yes, it's so freaking expensive. So yes, that's definitely something we're seeing. And so one of the things and why I'm asking for your questions is we can cover a lot in 90 minutes, and I'm really psyched about the content we've got today. And we know that there are more sessions we need to do, because I think there is, as we talk to our friends at Resilience Initiative, I think that we're just scratching the surface. This is our first sort of ED oriented event that we're doing, and there's so much more training and space to be held here. So I appreciate all the ideas, and I'm very committed that if we don't answer your specific questions today, that we will definitely, whether it is in a one-on-one session or we host something just as Progressive Multiplier, we will make sure to get this all of this discussed. I'm
There are
not seeing
lots of questions in the chat, and some of them have already been spoken aloud. But I promise you that we're making notes of them
yes.
so that they'll either get answered today or we'll find a way to get you some answers and solutions all the
Yes.
time.
Solutions. All right. Any other questions anybody wants to shout out before we dive into the goodness? All right. Not seeing any hands. And I think I've got all the questions scribbled down appropriately. All right. So learning objectives today are simple. We're going to understand how to play your fundraising role as the ED. And if you're fortunate enough or unfortunate enough, depending on your experience of late, to have staff, how do you partner with your development staff as an executive director? I see that as a very popular sort of clarity of roles issue. I think, Tiffany, we need to do an entire session on clarity of roles based on different staffing structure machinations. The other big focus today is going to be learning what tools are available. This deck is chock full of them, lots of links. So make sure you watch your email after the training for the links to the tools and the trainings, and also defining what you need. And totally here for folks that need to stay off camera because they've got spotty Wi-Fi and things like that. But I'd love to do a session just on like clarity of roles. Because that answer is different depending on structure. So, all right, so let's get into it. I want to pick up where we left off last week. For those of you who weren't here, this will be the 30-second overview. One of my proxy for my own job description is George Gale's letter to a new executive director. George is the former ED at People's Action, and he wrote this letter as he was stepping down after 14 years in that role. And because, as most EDs, I came into my job and didn't have a job description. It was just, hey, you've done a great job managing the program. Here's the organization to run. Two very different skill sets, it turns out. So George breaks this down into your job as an ED is to inspire people to reach for the stars, grow and align your forces for battle, and raise the money to pay for it. So what we did last week is we broke down under each of those headings through a fundraising lens. What does that mean to inspire people to reach for the stars if you're doing your ED job and you've got that fundraising lens to it? Same with the other two. So what I'm going to do today is go through these. It's not going to be nearly as linear, but close. And go over the how. How do you do your short and long-term vision? How do you change the view of fundraising from, extractive to something that is way more than transactional? So that's the roadmap for today. Any questions along the way, please raise your hand, throw them in the chat, message Tiffany so she can wave her arms wildly and get my attention, all of that kind of stuff. All right. The inspiring people to reach for the stars. When we put our fundraising lens on our ED hat, I feel like as an ED, you need a hat with like different labels that you can take on and off. So when you have your fundraiser hat on in your ED role, how do you fulfill your duty? The very first thing, and it is the piece where EDs that I work with personally in coaching, is hands down the most missed piece, and it is the root of all evil. If things are unaligned or misaligned in some way further in the strategy, it's because of this. It is that the ED has not given the fundraiser or given themselves time to really map out what is both a short and long-term vision for the organization. I know you're going to say to me, Bethany, we've got a vision statement. What the hell are you talking about? We're not talking about like your money multiplied, change amplified, or we're here to realize democracy and achieve justice kind of vision statement. We're talking about something much bigger. The reason this is important is that it gives your fundraiser what I call their high-level shopping list. So I would like to everybody get cozy for a minute, and we're going to do a little story time. I'm going to read 2 pages out of this book, When No Thing Works. It is a mouthful of a title in terms of it, a Zen and Indigenous perspective on resilient shared purpose and leadership in the time, place of collapse. I had to read this book for a fellowship that I'm doing, and I was like, oh my God, really? and then I read it, and it was the best leadership book I have ever read. It was beyond clarifying in terms of what you actually needed to do as a strategist when it came to leadership. So, all right, story time. As in any journey, the most consequential one requires our knowing of where it is we're going. Horizon is a what, a place, and a time. It is the not seeing, not hearing, not feeling, the time, place yet to be that keeps us mired in place. Easily resolved. Let us see, hear, and feel. At the 2022 convention of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, a panel of mayors of the 4 counties of Hawaii were asked about the future of tourism, a complicated and emotional issue for Native peoples. When it came to Kauai's mayor, Derek Kawakami's turn, he told the story of his future self. Now retired, he is taking his grandchild, yet unborn, hint, hint, son, to his favorite beach to pass on his love for riding a few waves. They pull into the parking lot and easily found a space. Here, the audience burst into appreciative cheers and clapped at the novelty of this twist. On the way to the shore, they passed the island guests who are picking up trash as part of their mutual responsibility as guests, and the guides who are greeting newly arrived guests with hello, aloha. Here's the sweet smelling biodegradable sunscreen that won't kill off the coral reef. Oh, thank you for bringing your own. Swim on the side, please. His ending pause was met with more appreciative cheers, and needless to say, it was difficult for the other mayors to follow with their well thought out, but nonetheless blah, blah policy talk. The mayor's future story is only 20 or so years in the future, a near horizon indeed. And yet a simple story allowed us to see, hear, and feel all that we needed to know about the horizon we desired and will work towards. The blah, blah policies of regenerative tourism, ecologically safe products, community stewardship were brought to mutually thriving life. Think of and experience the future as the living story that descendants live in which they describe how ancestors imagined it and then made true. So, when we think about that story, there are some very distinct things that tells somebody who is keyed into raising money for your vision. There are very big programmatic visions underneath that. Are they written out to the dollar? Is there a spreadsheet involved? No. But it tells you where you are looking for that longer term money that may take much longer time to stored versus the things you want to do immediately. So what I want to do really quickly, so we're going to take, I'm going to say 5 minutes. So maybe take 2 minutes apiece. I want you to, we're going to break out into groups. And then we are going to tell your story of your 20 years in the future. And I know that this seems, they're like, Bethany, this is fundraising training. What are we doing? Trust me, because this is how we get the shopping list for your fundraiser, whether it's you or somebody else. So, Tiffany, could I ask you to do the breakout group magic, and then we'll bring everybody back. All right, y'all. Tiffany, how long do we have folks in the room?
We've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay. How many people are in each room? Just
No more than 3. I think
okay.
we've got 2 to 3 in a room now.
Okay. Great. So that should work. I had to do this exercise with Helen Kim from Rockwood yesterday. And it was really, really hard.
It is hard.
But it definitely gave me the good, big, bold ideas. So. And I think we got into the lab.
Oh, good.
So she said, "I'm so glad you're joining the lab." So I'm like, does that
And
mean
you were like,
something?
I won't show that on my face. We'll just go ahead and keep moving.
Just keep moving.
So I'm going to give them about 30 seconds and then hit the close room so they have 60 seconds to wrap up.
Perfect. Yeah, I definitely want to do like a clarity of roles, like true breakdown session.
Yeah, it seems like very necessary. People really want to talk about it. And I think understanding how to do that depending on where you are in scale, and also what kind of revenue projects you're running is really, really like people are hungry for that.
Sorry, I got called away. I think someone tried to invite me to a room.
That is okay, Julie. Don't worry about it.
Everybody will be joining us in 8 seconds. So take a deep breath.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, Whitney, sorry. No worries. And here's the rest of our crew. Excellent. All right. Raise your hand if that was super uncomfortable to do that kind of storytelling. Right? Okay. I was telling Tiffany during the break, I had to do that with a coach from Rockwood Leadership Institute yesterday. And I was so bad at it. She made me do it 3 times. And yeah, it was rough, but we got there and actually outlined sort of some of those big vision, longer term investments that we are doing. And yes, Amy, totally hear you. I'm a thinker with my pen. And it's always hard to know how to make like these quick breakout groups like totally accessible to all cognitive pathways. So I appreciate that. So I'm going to incentivize if somebody wants to be brave and is willing to do a little role play. I have a gift of both Norma's book and the workbook that goes with it that I will mail to you. So the first person in chat who says they're willing to role play with me, you will get a care package of good books.
And you're allowed to be super bad at it, even if
And
it's
you're
just
allowed
because
to
you
be
want the
super
book.
bad at it.
I'll do it. I like a gift.
All right, Fanta, let's do it. And we'll do it twice. Halim, you too. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So you be the executive director. I'm gonna be your development director when you have one, because I know you're a team of one right now in that department. So
Okay.
Fanta, I need to know what we're raising money for, and it takes 3 years usually to get a source of money from meeting them to across the line or to build some way to bring revenue in. Tell me what your big vision is for the organization so that I can go sell it.
Okay. My big vision for the communities that we serve is inspired by their vision, but it's really a world in which girls have access to school, can decide if they get married, who they get married with, and where their family can support them to create the kind of future that they aspire to. And I'm dreaming for that for an organization that is well resources to provide the type of quality funding that is necessary for that long-term work to happen, because gender norm change doesn't happen overnight.
All right. So as your development director, I need to go find a multi-year source of funding or sources, because we've got entrenched cultural norms that we're trying to change. And there are likely lots of phased projects, and we're going to be able to give an impact investor or a foundation or maybe even a corporate sponsor feedback along the way. So I could put together a package that could maybe even be a 10-year investment with, like, call it 5 waves of 2-year investments along the way.
Oh my God, can I hire you, Bethany?
So let's give it up for Fanta for thank you so much for being brave. And I have my dream job, but my brain is always here. And I love to work with our executive directors, and Tiffany and I are trying to figure out how we can leverage my ED role to sort of create that community of support for EDs who are fundraising. All right. So Halim and Amy, I'm gonna set up time with both of you to do this storytelling and send you your books too. But I want to make sure that we are moving on here because we got a lot to cover. Um, so I know a little bit hokey, but that is really where it has to start, is the big vision. It's not the little vision. It's not, damn, I need to hire somebody next year, or this particular program needs to go this far in the next 12 to 18 months. That's important, but it's not the end of the game. So you have to tell the much bigger story. So what I would ask everybody to think about, especially for those of you, including me, who that is really hard to step into that bold visioning, tell us what would be helpful. So that can be in an email follow-up, or if you think about it and throw it in the chat. What would be helpful? Is it storytelling practice? Is there, like, for those of you who are old enough and remember what Mad Libs look like what are the tools that we can provide that make that storytelling easier? Because you are literally the only person who has the positional power to tell that story. Think about that and let that sit for a minute. Other folks can say, here's our strategic plan. You are the only one who can say, here is my vision for what we will have accomplished 20 years down the road and what that current reality looks like. Okay. The reason that that is important, the other part of that inspire part of your job as an ED who fundraises, is that communications calendar. And Amy, I see you in the chat. Thank you for that. Storytelling is part of the ED job, especially when it comes to fundraising. That story softens the ground for every dollar you will raise or get invested in the future. And again, you're the only one with the positional power to set it and tell that story as your own. So I can tell the vision for Progressive Multiplier and where I want us to be in 20 years. Tiffany, as the head of our programs, for those of you who asked about where does program fit into fundraising, Tiffany can tell the story of how the programs she designs gets us there. So when we talk about role clarity, it's those little nuances of, we can't think about positional power as a bad thing. Positional power is role clarity and subject matter expertise. I set the vision. Tiffany can say, here's how we can get there from the program side of the house, step by step. So storytelling is the precursor to the next part, which is aligning the forces for battle. So when it comes to telling this story, you have to actually have a plan to get your voice out there, which, if knowing how many people said that they were really bad at the storytelling, my bet is that this is likely also a challenge for many of us. So show of hands, how many of you have a communications plan for your organization that includes you as a voice? Yep, Whitney, we can totally do that. So Julie, I see your hand.
I got that, Bethany.
Okay. Fanta, I see your hand. So we've got 2 of us out of 13 that have their voice in their communications plan. So another question, how many of you have a communications plan, period, for your organizations? Seeing a few more hands there. Okay. Great. So first thing is, if you don't have a communications plan for your org, we've got 2 trainings available to you. Tiffany's put the links in the chat. One is a training on, here is how you put together a comms plan. The other is a really simple template on how to get started. So that should be a good basis. That is a 90-minute training. So we could make this 2-session training that we've done an entire course with all the things that are embedded in it, but that's easily accessible to you on our website. You just have to register for our convergence. So take the training, download the template. The other thing, another like shameless pitch for one-on-one coaching, this is the kind of thing we can help with in one-on-one coaching, is take 5 hours and knock out what your comms plan for the year should be. The key for an ED in fundraising, it doesn't have to be complicated. We just make sure you or your development staff has evidence of your voice and vision to point to every month. Take a big breath. That is not as much as it sounds like. It does not have to be like a research paper every month. It could be a LinkedIn post. It could be a podcast. It could be a blog. It could be you sitting on a panel of a webinar. It could be you being quoted in an article or a research paper, anything like that. Things where you can say, yes, like, this is our ED, here is their vision, and here is what it is out there. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So I wanted to give a brief example and then talk about where any hurdles people have are in doing this. So this is a snippet from an email that Julian Walker, during his tenure as the CEO of Push Black, sends. So I get this monthly update. Julian has now moved on recently from the organization, but Push Black has been a grantee of ours. And his vision is a Black media ecosystem that is responsible for Black liberation in this country. So this beginning few paragraphs of this particular email back in August of 2023, take a second and read that. And from a CEO or an EDC, think about how he is the only one with the positional power to deliver that message. That would have felt totally different coming from one of the program folks or one of the fundraisers, or even coming from a board member. The other thing I think that is brilliant about this very simple email that Julian has put out on a monthly basis is that he is always incredibly intentional about saying, here's what we're up to in the short term. So 2023, here's our short-term horizon and what we want to do. And then here's this longer-term horizon of we are building this audience, we are retaining this audience, and we are going to do this deepening of trusted relationships because we are going to take that next step in, you know, what we're aligning our forces for, which is in this case, Black liberation. Does everybody see sort of the really subtle and simple brilliance of what we mean when this is telling the story of vision from your place of positional power? Any questions about this? Since everybody, we had very few folks that actually had a comms plan and even fewer folks that had a plan for their voice in their organizational comms plan. Outside of the very obvious bandwidth and the world is on fire answer, what are the specific things that are your hurdles to getting your voice and vision out there? So that we can retrofit the things that would make it easier.
I have a question. Are you inviting us to just come off mute and share questions?
Yeah, do it.
I'm curious about, I have it related to this. I have a development director who will draft things for me. So I'm curious about when you say your voice, and she does have more, she's been a development director for other organizations for many years. So she has more of the expertise around like maybe what research says we should put in a fundraising letter or that kind of thing. And it's not quite my voice. And she's very open to then me like putting my mark on it. But I'm just curious what you think about that. Like if when you say your voice, is it important that it actually start with the ED, or is it fine to have someone else draft it? Or yeah, I think I'm just kind of curious about that whole dynamic.
I think it is fine to have someone else draft it. I think it's really important that that person is there is the science of writing a good appeal letter. Like when you're talking about like what's a fundraising email that converts to actual donations? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, so there is that piece, and that is her or his position, their positional power and expertise of they know that science, you know your vision. So what I would say is have them draft and here are the things that you need to maintain. So when I work with EDs on this, it's here's the length, here's where we've tested the ask in priority of the narrative, here's, you know, that kind of thing, or here's the subject that converts the best for us. But that's it. That's the limit of their expertise. The rest is on you to cast that as the vision. So it's really, that is the best use of both. Tiffany, do you have any thoughts there? As a development director who has worked with many an ED on this kind of thing. You're on mute, my friend. Go ahead.
I don't think I have any good specifics beyond that. I think you do such a good job of carrying the umbrella, Bethany.
So yeah, I think it's that, Whitney, it needs to be in your voice because your personality, your strength of belief in the mission, what sets you on fire, what frustrates you has to be part of what you're talking about.
And
What
that's
we
not the
are-
same as an organizational voice.
Mm-mm.
And that doesn't mean that you have to, it can mean that you get to train someone to speak in your voice.
Yes.
And doing that intentionally takes a lot of load off of you, even in reviewing things before they go. But also because it's good learning for your communications professionals or your dev professionals, whoever's going to write in your voice, to learn how to speak in different voices, like for the organization, because
Mm.
that's how they master telling your story in different ways to different audiences. And it's like that is a specific skill, a professional skill that good speech writers, comms writers, dev writers should be mastering throughout their career to really capture different voices different ways. And again, that's separate from your kind of organizational voice, which hopefully everybody gets on board with as a institution.
Yeah.
Thank
Whitney, does
you.
that answer your question?
Totally. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Sure. And then Mallory, I hear you in the chat, and that yes, a diversity of voices is not a bad thing. And for really sophisticated programs, they, it's really what voice matches what communication goal. So for those of you who've worked with me for a long time or been a part of Fundraising Friday, like I grew up largely in the healthcare nonprofit sector. So worked at Alzheimer's and American Diabetes and had American Heart as a client and things like that. And the nuance of sort of when you're talking about this program or this patient need or et cetera, the actual voice that holds the most authority and can talk with the most subject matter expertise and resonance is really important. So the ED doesn't need to be talking about every single program. The ED needs to be talking about the vision because that's their subject matter expertise. I think we especially as more progressive groups, we don't like to think about hierarchical power. And it's not that it's a hierarchy, it's the ED has a very distinct job of having the vision. And I think one of the problems that we have as EDs is that, especially in small shops, it has not. We have 9 people. I can count on one hand how long it's been since we had 2 people. So I truly get this, that it's like the ED is everything when you're in those beginning stages. So it's hard to say that the vision is my job. The more mature you get, the more you get to really focus on that piece. But when you're in those beginning stages, it can't be the piece that gets lost because you have to go over the balance sheet or make sure you've got insurance or make sure the lights are on. So
That
all
kind
right,
of relates to my question,
yeah, go
which
ahead,
is,
Kate.
so we are small, tiny, we're 7 people, and we have a co-ED model. And we all came, like I came up from operations and my co-ED came up from programs and the other one from finance. So we kind of hold our spheres of what it takes to get stuff done. And we do have a very non-hierarchical and collective vision setting process. And we're a network. So all of our communications are for members.
Yep.
So we don't have a lot of any of our voice in the public. Like we're not writing public blog posts or articles regularly. And so how do you start that without it feeling like kind of this new artificial way of writing when it's not been kind of our how at all?
Yeah, and Katie, if you got the chance to work one-on-one with one of us, that's a perfect kind of thing to dig into. But
Okay.
at a high level, it is when you look at the communications you put out now, how do you flip that and even start inserting, like if it's in an e-news or in a case study or anything like that, how do you just start putting like little pieces of the voice there so that it doesn't feel abrupt? The other thing you can do is start like a separate almost campaign of introducing the people behind the work that they are seeing. And we find that those are usually really well received. And they, as I say, it doesn't have to be like, oh, let's write like this 3-page thing. It's like, do a quick video of like, here's what I do here and here's why. Just those sorts of things to subtly start introducing the voices. And that gives you soft ground to then start sharing the bigger vision. And it's fun. Like the ED isn't the dictator, right? It's your job
Yeah.
to have the vision. But I don't do any visioning without having a deep conversation with Tiffany and Kimberly, who is the other sort of leg of our leadership stool. You know, it's my job to put structure to it, lead it, make it roll, make it resonant. But my brain is definitely not the only one in there. So I think you can still accomplish both. Does that help, Katie?
It does. Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
I
definitely
know
would love
we
to
have,
dig into that. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I know we have to rush because we got more, but I want to just give a
We got-
couple sentences back to Katie on that. 100% agree with what Bethany shared. And one of the luxuries that you have in that really deeply shared model of leadership is that if you start to gently introduce your individual voices to the collective voice of the organization, it allows you to show that you are leaderful, which is really helpful in times of crisis or when funders are trying to understand like how you do what you do. And it can help people understand that each of you is coming in with a subject matter expertise that then gets translated into future communications. So if you're having like there's a particular issue in the world right now that's related specifically to the program work that you do, and you want to show that you have this like logical leadership brilliance here in this particular subject, that message coming from the person who has established themselves as one of the leaders who has this particular, you know, expertise in this particular program area, really helps to give that additional validation for you out in the world when people are trying to understand why they need to be responsive to the needs you're having right now.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, great add in there, Tiffany. I appreciate that. Okay, so again, another assignment for you in terms of if there are tools, templates, or trainings that would help you cast your voice and vision more broadly, like do you need coaching on how to write an ED blog like Julian or you know, do you need help on figuring out, you know, what does a light lift LinkedIn post look like that, you know, I could send to those I'm trying to get in to invest in the organization. Those are the kinds of things we can help with and build as part of our convergence work. So let us know what you need and we will put that out there. All right. The second tenet from George Gale, growing and aligning your forces for battle. I am going to actually flip the way that I was intending on doing this. Yes, Comspost taking on your voice. We can totally do that. Is because I know staffing is the big question. So I'm going to go lightning fast through these this first piece so that we can spend the majority of our time left on the staffing pieces. So one of the things that came up as a very heavy topic in our last call was how do we help ourselves and help others in terms of growing and aligning the forces for battle, to see fundraising as not extractive, transactional, the dirty work, etc. This is, we have an entire training on why this feels this way. And it's largely due to how philanthropy and how the act of donating and giving that is deeply rooted to both ancient culture and, you know, our modern reference is actually colonial Britain, colonial England, as nobody should be shocked. So we have this industrial complex around our work, which intentionally sort of by design puts it in this, you know, sort of dirty work category. There are 5 distinct facets of this complex: government, the capitalist ecosystem, foundations, nonprofits, and then the businesses that support them are within this ecosystem. And they each play a really distinct role in how it sort of casts fundraising as transactional. So if there is one training that you take to start with, and Tiffany, if you could grab that link. We do, I think one of the best trainings that we've done is this training on the nonprofit industrial complex and what our responsibilities are as EDs who fundraise. How do we both navigate and challenge appropriately where the systems around our work uphold inequity? So this is, I think, one of, as I say, really helps as a foundation of how do you get through this whole, and making sure that your values align in your fundraising and really building that culture in your organizations. And any of the trainings that we have, you're welcome to share those links with your board, or if you want a live presentation to your board, your staff, your advisory council, whatever, holler. We're happy to do it. Because sometimes it's just easier to have somebody else do it. We always say you can't be a prophet in your own land. So speaking of the boards, we know that as part of the forces that we have to grow and align in terms of the how do you instill a fundraising ethos in your board and actually train them. We have 2 links here for you. One is a training on how to recruit and steward your board that makes them a fundraising board, because we're not a fundraising board, cannot fly for you as an ED, because even if your board is made up of 19 and 20-year-old students, college aged kids, that is still a fundraising board. We work with Heirs to Our Oceans, and no, those kids do not have, they can't write a check, they cannot open big doors. Their part of the fundraising is the broadcasting of that voice. Their part of the fundraising are being those media interviews, all of those things. Oh, Heirs to Our Oceans is like near and dear to my heart. So fundraising does not necessarily mean I'm writing you a big check or I'm opening you a door to a big check. It is that ground softening. It is the positional authority of being a board member and what story they can tell uniquely. So there are a lot of things that don't involve that direct giving that are still fundraising. So great training. I'm biased because I think that might be mine. And then the other link there is a fantastic panel we hosted with the executive director of Green Faith, his development director, and their board chair for a very candid conversation about how they turned their board around when it came to fundraising. So lots of resources that we've already put together thanks to Resilience Initiatives funding and a couple other of our supporters who have helped us do this. So, and also, again, we are happy to help you train your board. Any questions here? I know I'm going lightning fast so we can get to the nitty gritty staffing stuff.
Just real quick, would a training for the board be like one of those offerings that we could have for free as part of strategic support, or is that something we would pay for? Is that separate?
No, we'll do that for free as part of strategic assistance.
Awesome. Thank you.
So like you have 5 hours of us that you can use how you want. And if how you want to use it is putting us in front of your board or staff, great. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
We've also done individual coaching. If you are hiring junior fundraisers and they need a boot camp, we can do that too. So we have done that for several groups.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on our board friends? All right. Okay, let's talk staff in terms of that aligning our forces for battle. The staff is, of course, it's yourself, your staff, your board, and then your broader partnerships. You got to get right with your relationship with fundraising, and then you got to get your staff right. So there is no one best way to staff fundraising. If anybody tells you there is, a set way to do this, they're wrong. Because each of us as executive directors who have fundraising responsibility bring a very different ability and time to the role. So I spend 50% of my time on fundraising. I'm also a fundraiser with 20 years experience. This is not a challenge for me. Whereas most of you on this phone, that is not the case. You have developed programs, you have been advocates, you have done a ridiculous amount of amazing work, but fundraising wasn't necessarily part of your world. The one rule of thumb, and you've heard me say this already, is that this is really about the highest use of your time. So starting to design your staffing solution for fundraising starts with what is the highest use of your time in your seat of positional power and your subject matter expertise. So we've talked about the vision, right? You are the only one who is ever going to be able to put that positional authority behind the vision. But your subject matter expertise might be a little different. Tiffany has a ton of background in individual giving. We have someone else who has done a lot of major gift. I've done a lot of alternative fundraising methodology. So again, everybody has a different sort of spice they're bringing to the recipe. So what we want to make sure isn't on your plate as an ED is something that is not aligned with the highest use of your time. So if you are actually executing a year-end fundraising appeal, like pushing the send button or licking the envelopes, if you're doing mail, if you're doing prospect research to find, new foundations, things like that. In the reality of a one-person shop, yep, it's all on your plate. But where we start to evolve is to get those non-highest use of your time elements off of your plate first. So your highest use is telling your org story and future vision in places where people are going to get hooked into investing. It is listening to the perspectives that should shape your vision and turning those into platforms that can be invested in. So I always keep grantee work in my own portfolio as an executive director. So I never go a day without talking to a movement group, because if I ever do that, I'm not doing my job of listening. It's building the relationships. Somebody had mentioned that at the top of the call, that so much of this is the relationship, and it's then that is a good use of your time. The admin stuff, the dev ops stuff is not necessarily the best use of an ED's time. Does that resonate? And does anybody want to push back and say that's lovely, but that's not reality? Not seeing. Tiffany, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something as a resource for folks in the room who have said earlier or agreed earlier. It's so hard to find the right fundraiser because this is all built on relationships and I hold the relationships. And so how am I supposed to hire a person that can help me do that like integral work? One, we can talk about it in a workshop. We can get together one-on-one and talk about it for a few hours. But the other thing is that you want to spread those relationships among people on your team with lots of knowledge, great person skills, and the willingness to like track the conversation, share out with the group so people know where relationships stand. And if you have a slightly larger team than just you and one other person or whatever, and you want to learn how to share that responsibility out and protect your revenue in the event that someone takes off or some kind of relationship collapse happens, we have some materials for you to plan in advance and also how to react to the moment if that happens, so that you can feel secure in sharing those relationships and knowing that you will not take a huge funding hit if somebody leaves who's holding revenue relationships or revenue responsibility in your organization.
And brag on Tiffany. She did a kick-ass fundraising succession training, one of my favorites that we've done in the past 6 years, with lots of good tools. So Tiffany, if you want to put the link to that one in there, because whether it's you're planning on somebody leaving, that is a great way to learn how to share those relationships. So I want to start with a little inventory here. 90 seconds on the clock. Put your cursor in the chat. I want you to take a minute and brainstorm what is on your fundraising plate as an ED that doesn't align with the highest use of your time. So what doesn't require your positional power or your unique knowledge? And write them all out in a list and then press enter. Ready? Go. Keep them coming. I see prospecting. I see proposal writing. Oh, database management, Tyler, I feel you. Weeds. Networking, interesting. Writing proposals. As opposed to editing them, 100%. All right, 26 seconds. Anything else that is not the highest use of our time? Grant reports. Especially those grant reports, like, you know, our friends at the big foundations, that the reports end up being like 10 freaking page long. I'm not bitter. All right, 60 seconds up. Acknowledgement letters. CRM stuff. Board blurbs. Yep. Oh, Katie, there's so much in that statement. Thank you guys. I appreciate the vulnerability that everybody has approached this conversation with. So what I'm seeing, grant writing and reporting. I'm seeing any kind of prospecting. I'm seeing any kind of tech management around the database. Acknowledgement letters. Okay. And yep. So Katie, totally not alone. Any of you who have, so part of my to-do list next week is to rebuild our pipelines in our database for HubSpot. So even when we know things shouldn't be on our plate, sometimes the reality is we can't get them off our plate. Or there's the nuance of, as an ED, you hold some piece of knowledge that nobody else on the team has. So for those of you, I want to take a second swipe through this. For those of you who are doing the grant writing, doing the grant reporting, doing any of the tech processes, is there any reason that is it your staff doesn't feel comfortable doing because some part of it is in your brain? Does that resonate with anybody? Amy, kind of. Carrie, I see a smirk. Sometimes, yep. So that is my personal biggest issue. There's something magical. All EDs have the magical brain. That is part of the positional power. That there is the ED fairy dust. You just must need to know how to do it. So there is a lot, especially if you are an early ED, like you've only been around for a year and you're a founding ED or you're a second ED. There is a lot of shit in your brain that is nowhere else, that you haven't taken the time to document, etc. That's part of that fundraising succession stuff that Tiffany put the link in the chat to. We're just getting to the point. Tiffany is a year in. She was the first other sort of leader that we hired on our team. That, like, I no longer sign our grant contracts. Tiffany does all of that. Any of those relationships with funders where there is a huge part of program delivery, Tiffany has now taken over those. So, and Regina, we'll follow up with you one-on-one. So that sharing is a big part of getting those things. So be really honest about how do you get those things off of your off of your plate for the things that are just in my mind. The other thing that we have done is for those grant reports, for those grant applications, it took a little time, but it was well worth the time. We did sort of a wiki, homegrown wiki of here are the typical questions on a grant application, and here's our stock answer. And we actually organized it so that anybody on our team could probably 80% bake a grant application with that. So that's reduced my time in doing that. So I actually have had interns put them together because it's a copy paste, and then one of us who is doing more of the program design or that kind of thing. So that is another piece to getting those things that aren't the highest use of your time off your plate in part of this evolution. So Tiffany, I'm thinking in addition to the clarity of roles, I'm feeling like some sort of phased, like if you're in this situation, first do this, then this to get it totally in the right lane of somebody's role. So let's connect you and I on that. And I'm I'm hearing that that might be a good thing. Amy, I love that you've called out if you've got a really junior staff that can't think vision. It's not their job to think vision or even bigger operational picture. So you can ask them to do edits, but nothing else. That's fine. Because I think that it's training junior staff if given the vision, then what can they produce from it? I think often we sort of accidentally switch that. So I think when you've got junior staff, if you can give them a solid example and say, instead of this vision, I'm doing this vision. Can you replicate the rest of this using this vision? And even do it on, just as an exercise for them, for training to see, and then you can see where their weak points are in that. So I put together this model. I want to stop talking before we get into this model and pause. Are there any questions? We've got really robust chat, which is fantastic, but I want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody who is interested in popping in with a question about staffing. Okay. So when it comes to how to answering the question of how do I staff fundraising, the very first thing we have to ask is how much money can we spend on investing in fundraising now? And then what can we do in phases? So if right now you cannot invest anything, thanks, Whitney. I know we were going to lose a lot of people right around we had a lot of folks who popped in ahead of time and told us they were going to have to leave during the call. But so the first thing that we do is how much can you invest? And there are different phases of, you're obviously going to be able to hire a junior staffer first. I highly recommend not hiring too junior when it comes to fundraising if there's nobody between super junior and you. Just wait until you can hire somebody who is mid-level. It is better to outsource to a consultant or to find a high-level volunteer, like we talked about, Catch a Fire as a resource, or if you can recruit a fundraiser to your board who is willing to give their time. Because if you hire too junior, especially in fundraising, and they don't have enough, you can't give them mentorship and teaching time, especially if you're an ED without a fundraising background, that is a recipe for burnout and disaster. So that is one of those things that we would highly recommend. Your first fundraising hire needs to be independent enough that they would be what we would call mid-mature. Does that make sense to everybody? So the money is the first question. The second question is, what kind of revenue do you need in the short and the long term? So the example was brought up of, we're doing the foundation stuff. We want to get in potentially to major major gifts or individual giving, when is the right time to do that? That's a great question, because it's usually the first non-grant money that organizations try to go after. Donation programs should always start with major donors, and go down to grassroots donors if you're building, if you don't have time to organize grassroots donors. Organizing grassroots donors takes a lot more time and effort over time, than does a small major gift program. Tiffany, do you have a POV there as somebody who has done both?
Um, I do, and it's too expansive to get into in this short conversation, but I think the key is understanding in the early stages, like who's actually got the interest, and put your attention where the interest is. And if the interest is in your grassroots, follow the grassroots. And
Mm-hmm.
if you actually were incepted by somebody who's got lots of high dollar donors, start there, and
Yep.
then build your grassroots out underneath it. Because trying to do both at the same time, if you're all starting at the same place, if they're both starting from zero,
Yep.
it's just a recipe for a headache.
Yep. No, you make a really good point. Like if you have, if you are a power building organization and grassroots donations, and membership model is a no-brainer because you've got that kind of volume of people, absolutely makes sense to start there. The specific questions that had come up last time were the pros and cons of having development staff versus an ED and program leads do fundraising. And the way I would answer this is that there should always be a program person involved in fundraising if possible, because they are the ones with the positional power and subject matter expertise to understand that program backwards and forwards. At this point, Tiffany knows our program way better than I do, because it has been her baby for the last year. So in a perfect world, she and I are on any pitch call together. That said, development staff are the folks who are doing the prospecting. They are doing, in our world, they're doing the prospecting, they're doing the materials development. So our pitch decks are on point. They are doing all of those acknowledgments. They're doing the scheduling. They're making sure that we are getting a donor email out, like somebody said, those board blurbs every month. Those are the kinds of things that, really, again, looking at that clarity of role. You're all fundraising, but somebody is taking more of the operational and sort of keeping the stewardship fire burning, versus those moments when you need positional power and subject matter expertise of an executive director or a program person. Does anybody have any specific questions in there around development staff versus ED and program leads doing the fundraising? And Halim, seeing your comment in terms of great comm staff before fundraising, I could not agree more. You cannot do fundraising if you haven't softened the ground with great storytelling. And somebody who is a really good comm staff can do some of those things, like a development staffer that is more the operational side. So somebody who could actually put together your one pager, with your theory of change and what you're offering, like a comm staff that actually is not so much media placement, but somebody who is a little bit more of a generalist who could do fundraising communication, is a really great first hire to make, before you hire, any level of dedicated fundraising staff. They're very much an intersectional discipline between communications and fundraising. The other specific question we had were options as an ED for staffing and outsourcing fundraising. Yes, PR expertise over journalism. So the outsourcing fundraising, I don't remember who it was, but talking about hiring fundraising consultants and going through a couple different fundraising hires. It is very hard to outsource fundraising as a whole discipline. There are pieces of it that are great to outsource. So hiring somebody to put together your initial foundation prospecting list and doing that kind of boxed up research project, or hiring somebody to do your materials. Like I just had a contractor who put together our theory of change presentation. So I think that there are wonderful point solutions for outsourcing fundraising. If you are into digital fundraising, somebody to actually do the production and the optimization behind sending the emails, optimizing the donation forms, things like that. I think the pieces that are very hard to outsource is answering the what are you actually quote unquote selling. And I don't use that term lightly because that's what fundraisers are pitching. They are saying, here, I need investment in this thing so that we reach this mission end game. And it's okay to put the label of selling on that in my book, because you are asking for an investment. So I think that actually coming up with that, what is it that we're asking? I think that that's an inside job. That's one of those positional expertise pieces between your program staff and your leadership. Tiffany, what are the things you would think of are safe to outsource versus not safe to outsource?
Depending on the size of the organization, there are some data management things that could be
Yeah.
easily outsourced. I find that a lot of organizations get in the weeds about data cleanliness, data management, and it can really be a time suck when you don't have the capacity for a time suck. And so I think that's one thing that I've found some people find really great use in. And then also just you kind of touched on it a little bit, Bethany, when you said help me find those major donors, but like help me understand how to build a pipeline from the data we have. Sometimes you've got so much data and it's great that you have it, but you don't yet know what to do with it, or you know what to do with it, but you just don't have the bandwidth to set up the plan to deal with it. That's a great place where somebody can take a hold of the data and help you build it into a pipeline that can be your strategy for a year or two or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So that, I have outsourced to do like a pipeline build in a bigger organization when it was just the data was messy and everything else. So that's a definite great option. Are there any specific pending questions about like what to keep in-house versus what to outsource? I know someone had asked, when do you know it's time to hire? So that highest use of time is a critical indicator for when is it time to hire. So if as an ED, you cannot do the things you're supposed to do, like the visioning, like the getting out there and sharing the vision, like making the partnerships, and partnerships and networking are two different things. So I will circle back around. Um, so those are the things that that's the first indicator, is that you can't do the things that only you can do, or the things that will move the needle for the organization's mission far more than will writing acknowledgement letters and things like that. I think the other key piece of when you know it is time to hire versus outsource is really comes down to an expertise in a money piece. If you are outsourcing something that isn't a high level, you need somebody to write a strategy, you need somebody to come up with something new. If you are outsourcing the management of fundraising, you will reach that break point where it is cheaper to bring in somebody. So at Progressive Multiplier, we do not pay less than a thriving wage. So the bottom for our FTEs is $92,000 a year. So when our outsourcing for some of our development pieces got into that range across several different contractors, then it was okay, let's see what all of them are doing and let's make a full-time hire. So it really is a domino effect, and you can track it on a spreadsheet. So Tiffany, I think that's one of those other tools that we could put together pretty easily for this crew. Okay, so I didn't get to a whole lot of the content that I'd like to, so I'm going to ask Resilience Initiative if they will let us do a third session, because I feel like there is some important stuff here still to do. So the one thing that I want to make sure everybody takes away from this is we are here as a resource. If you have, I'm sure you have questions. If you have questions we can help with, we're here. We also have over, I think, almost 200 trainings online now over our 6 years. So if you go to progressivemultiplier.fund and under 4 movement groups, find the convergence. These are all of the topics we have trainings on, and toolkits and things like that. So it's a good, easy, free way to build your expertise and perspective as an ED who has to fundraise. Please sign up for one-on-one coaching, or if you've got specific questions, shoot us an email. We are more than happy to talk to you about these. And I will get with Resilience Initiative on both scheduling a third encore session to finish this content. And if they do not want to host it, we'll make sure we'll reach back out to you individually and we'll host it, because I think it's important. And then Tiffany and I are going to put our heads together and figure out how to do a session on like actually models of specific, different fundraising options. So how does that all sound? And is there anything else you'd ask us to put on that list? Yes, we'll absolutely send out the slides if you can't make an encore. Awesome. Thank you all so much. This has been a really, I've so enjoyed teaching these last 2 sessions and having this conversation, and being an ED is the loneliest role. And so it has been just personally really great for me to be able to talk to other EDs about this stuff that's really hard that we have to navigate. So thank you so much for creating this little community. It means a lot.
The
Have
survey
wonderful
link is in
days.
the chat. Please fill out the survey. It's in the chat.
Yes, survey. I always forget that part, Tiffany.
Really important so we can figure out what you want to hear next and how we
Yes.
can improve going forward. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.